Thank you for joining us for another episode of our Notebook Deep Dive podcast. These podcasts are based on either books, essays, or lectures I have written or given over the last 3 decades.
Okay, so welcome to another deep dive.
Right.
And today we're taking a look at, well, this really cool concept, rhetorical inception.
Mm.
It comes from a 2025 sort of field manual, I guess you could call it, by Joseph E. Sapp.
Okay.
And the basic idea, it's so fascinating. It's like planting an idea in someone's mind,
Yeah.
but not just planting it so that it sits there.
Right.
You're planting it so that it grows, so that it takes root.
Yeah.
And, for anyone listening who likes to get to the heart of things, right,
Yeah.
we're going to try to understand the real fundamentals of how this works,
Absolutely.
how our minds work in a way that makes us more or less receptive to new ideas.
Right. And I think that's the real key here. Not to get lost in the weeds of the theoretical,
Yeah.
but to really understand that our minds are set up in a way that makes certain ideas more likely to take root than others.
Exactly.
It's like, like gardening.
Right.
Some soil is better for some plants,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. So let's dive right in. Sapp, he starts off his first chapter.
Yeah, okay.
It's called The Architecture of Thought, How Ideas Take Root.
All right.
And he points out this really crucial difference between how we process information versus a computer.
Okay.
We don't just take in data, right? We immediately try to make meaning out of it.
We're constantly, yeah, exactly. We're constantly looking for patterns,
Right.
trying to make connections.
Yes.
And very often we jump to conclusions before we even have all the information.
It's amazing how fast it is too.
It is. It's incredible.
Yeah. And it's like we're hardwired to do that,
Right.
to try to make sense of the world.
Yeah,
Even with very little to go on.
absolutely. And it's this fundamental need to make meaning that leads to this really powerful principle that Sapp highlights. What feels true is often stronger than what is true.
That's so interesting.
It's really profound because it means that our initial gut reaction to an idea can often be more influential in shaping our beliefs than any objective facts that we might encounter later.
Right. It's like that first impression you get of somebody.
Absolutely.
It takes a lot to overcome that.
It does. It really does. And to delve deeper into how these feelings of truth take root, Sapp introduces this concept called schema theory.
Schema theory, okay.
Now, it sounds a little bit academic, but the idea itself is really straightforward.
Okay.
Think of schemas as the brain's way of organizing all the information we've ever encountered.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So kind of like a filing system almost.
Yeah, like mental frameworks or blueprints for how the world works. So whenever we come across something new, our brains automatically try to fit it into these existing structures.
Right. So it's almost like we're trying to understand a new story based on the stories we already know.
Exactly. It's based on our prior experiences, our existing beliefs, our understanding of different categories.
Got it. So when a new idea comes along, how does it interact with those existing schemas?
Well, that's where it gets really fascinating because Sapp outlines 3 main ways this can happen. First, you can present the idea in a way that aligns perfectly with their current understanding. It just slots right in, it fits.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, you can try to subtly reshape their existing schema, kind of like gently nudging their understanding, so that this new idea begins to make sense within this slightly adjusted framework.
I see.
And then the third approach is a little bit more disruptive.
Okay.
You create a moment of what we could call mental friction or dissonance.
Okay.
You challenge their existing schema just enough to create an opening for this new idea to take hold.
Gotcha.
So each of these strategies, they have their own nuances. They require a different kind of touch.
Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting for me.
Okay.
It's the idea of narrative logic.
Oh, yeah.
Sapp, he argues that a well-told story, even if it's not completely true, can be so persuasive.
Yeah. Like more persuasive than just a bunch of facts.
Absolutely. It's like people are more likely to believe a lie that has a clear beginning, middle, and end, right?
Right.
That feels like a complete picture than a truth that's kind of fragmented.
A truth that doesn't quite add up,
Exactly. And it's all about showing cause and effect.
Right.
Creating that aha moment where the listener thinks, oh, okay, that makes sense.
It's like you're putting everything together for them.
You're providing a sense of coherence that our minds just naturally crave. When we hear a story, we tend to fill in those missing pieces, even if some details are absent.
Right.
And that feeling of completeness contributes to that sense of truth that we were talking about earlier.
So it's not just enough to just like list a bunch of events.
Right.
You have to create that sense of recognition.
Exactly. You have to highlight the before and after.
Right.
The clear link between cause and consequence.
Right.
That makes the idea resonate on a much deeper level. Yeah. Now, at the end of this first chapter, Sapp, he talks about the optimal time to plant an idea.
Okay.
Like, when is a person really ready to receive a new idea?
Right.
And he says, it's when they're already feeling some kind of tension or uncertainty about something.
Okay, so there's already a problem that needs to be solved.
Right, exactly. Or when the new idea confirms something they already suspected.
Oh, interesting.
Or when it answers a question they were already pondering.
I see.
Right. And then this one, I find this so fascinating. When the idea arrives after a kind of mental pause.
After a moment of silence.
Yeah, like a lull in their thinking.
That's really interesting.
It's like you're creating space for the idea to land.
You're not trying to force it on them.
Yeah.
You're allowing them to kind of discover it themselves.
Exactly.
And that's so powerful because if it feels like their own insight, it's much more likely to become a deeply held belief.
Right, because they came up with it themselves.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, as Sapp puts it so well, if it's their thought, it becomes their belief.
Okay, so moving on to Chapter 2, the psychology of suggestion, cognitive biases and receptivity.
Okay.
Now here, Sapp really focuses on the factors that make us more or less open to influence.
Okay.
Right. And he starts by talking about suggestibility.
Suggestibility, all right.
But not the way we usually think about it, like being hypnotized or something.
Right.
He's talking about just a normal state of mind.
Okay.
Where we're just naturally more receptive to external cues.
So everyone's suggestible to some degree.
Right.
It's just a matter of how much and when.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting, is that there are specific things that can make us more suggestible.
Okay, like what?
Well, Sapp, he outlines several of them, like lowered cognitive load.
So when our minds aren't already juggling a bunch of information.
Exactly. Or focused attention.
When we're completely absorbed in something.
Right. Emotional arousal.
Whether it's excitement, fear, even a bit of confusion.
And even information overload. Right.
Paradoxically, yes.
That's so interesting.
It can actually make us more susceptible to suggestion.
Because you're just trying to process all this stuff.
Exactly.
Right. And the perceived presence of authority.
Right. If someone seems like they know what they're talking about.
Right. We're more likely to just take their word for it.
Exactly.
A repetition of a message.
The more we hear something, the more likely we are to believe it.
Especially if it's repeated in slightly different ways, right?
Exactly. It just kind of seeps into our subconscious.
Right. Fatigue or decision exhaustion.
When we've already made a lot of choices, we're just mentally tired.
We're just not thinking as clearly.
Exactly.
And this is a big one. Social proof or consensus?
So the idea that if everyone else is doing it, it must be okay.
Or if everyone else believes it, it must be true.
Right. We have this deep-seated need to fit in.
Yeah. And it's amazing how often these things kind of come together, right?
I do.
Like, think about being in a busy, noisy environment.
Okay.
Where everyone around you seems to agree on something.
Right.
That combination of information overload and social proof, I mean, it's almost irresistible.
It can be really powerful. And Sapp, he provides this helpful way to think about it. He says, if rhetorical inception is like planting a seed, then suggestibility is like the period when the soil is soft and most receptive to that seed taking root.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
It is.
So it's all about recognizing those moments, you know?
Someone might be naturally more open to influence.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about priming.
Okay.
Sapp calls this the invisible setup.
The invisible setup. Okay.
And basically, it's the idea that being exposed to one thing can actually influence how we respond to something else, even if we're not aware of it.
Right. It's like setting the stage without the audience even knowing it.
Exactly. And he gives some really cool examples.
Okay, like what?
Like, if I say the word ocean,
Ocean.
what's the first word that comes to mind?
Salt.
Salt, right.
Right?
Or if we start talking about security,
Security.
people might become more receptive to policies that emphasize control.
Interesting.
Right. Or if we talk about Family.
It's family.
That might bring up concepts like trust or loyalty.
I see.
So it's all about preparing the mental landscape.
Yeah. You're not saying the thing.
Right,
You're
yeah.
saying the thing before the thing.
Exactly. It's like, I don't know, like if you're going to introduce a new idea about teamwork,
Okay.
right? Maybe you start by telling a little story about a group of people who overcame some huge obstacle by working together.
Right.
That primes the listener to think in a certain way
Exactly.
before you even get to the main point.
Right.
So social proof.
Social proof.
This is such a powerful force, right?
It is.
It's why laugh tracks work on TV shows. You know, you hear other people laughing.
Right.
You're more likely to laugh yourself.
Exactly. Even if the joke isn't that funny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or why, that bestseller label can make you more likely to buy a book. Or why those claims like 9 out of 10 dentists recommend,
Yeah.
they can still be effective, even if you're a little bit skeptical.
Right. Because it taps into our desire to fit in.
Right. We assume that if a lot of people believe something, it must be true.
Exactly. And Sapp outlines several ways that we can intentionally use social proof.
Okay.
Things like sharing testimonials, even starting with phrases like, I've been hearing a lot of people say,
Oh, interesting.
or citing relevant case studies,
Yeah.
highlighting examples of, widespread behavior,
Gotcha.
carefully selecting and presenting statistics,
Right.
and even suggesting a perceived consensus, like saying things like, it's generally understood that.
Yeah. So you're creating this impression that, this idea is already widely accepted. Exactly.
So, Chapter 3, Framing Reality, Setting the Stage for Inception.
Okay.
Now, this chapter gets into the art of shaping the context,
Okay.
like, the lens through which we interpret information.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Because it's not always just about the facts themselves, right?
Right.
It's about how those facts are presented.
The way they're framed.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Sapp makes this really important point, that we don't just perceive reality objectively.
Right.
We tend to see what we're directed to look at.
So framing is about controlling what people notice and what they ignore.
Exactly, and how they ultimately understand the information.
It's like you're setting the stage for how they're going to interpret everything.
Exactly, and he gives this this really clear definition of what a frame is.
Okay.
It's the context that gives meaning to information.
So it's like answering that unspoken question, what does this mean?
Exactly.
Okay.
And he uses this classic example of a politician who changes their stance on something.
Do we call that flip-flopping?
Right.
Or evolving?
Oh, interesting.
The underlying actions are the same,
Yeah.
but the frame we use totally changes how we interpret it.
Completely changes the meaning.
Right. And once that frame is established, it's hard to see it any other way.
It's like our minds get stuck in that initial interpretation.
Exactly.
And this leads to, this really important rule of framing.
Okay.
Control the question, and you don't need to control the answer.
That's so true.
Because by carefully shaping the initial question, you're already guiding the direction of their thinking.
And limiting their options.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then there's this phenomenon of the first frame wins.
The first frame wins.
It's like this anchoring bias.
Right.
The first frame that's presented just kind of becomes the reference point for everything that follows.
Oh,
It
interesting.
doesn't even have to be accurate or logical.
Right.
Just being first gives it this huge influence. Like magicians use this all the time.
Yeah.
They set up a false assumption early on.
Right.
Or trial lawyers, they present their core case theory during jury selection.
Oh, I see.
And politicians, they'll use terms like tax relief instead of tax cuts.
Right.
That initial frame, it's like an anchor.
It shapes how everything else is perceived.
Exactly. So another aspect of framing is the power of names and labels.
Okay.
Sapp argues that words are not neutral.
Right.
Every term we choose carries a frame. Like, think about the difference between calling something an estate tax versus a death tax.
Yeah. Totally different connotations.
Right. Or referring to people as protesters versus rioters.
Right.
Or using the terms undocumented versus illegal.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it makes a huge difference.
Absolutely.
And he points out that if you can get someone to use your language, you've already won half the battle.
Because they've accepted your frame.
Exactly.
Interesting.
He even talks about reframing personal challenges. Like, instead of calling it performance anxiety, you
Right.
could call it unprocessed energy.
Oh, I like that.
Or instead of resistance, you could think of it as momentum trying to change direction. Just that little shift in wording can change how you feel about it.
It can really empower you.
Yeah. And Sapp also talks about the power of framing through contrast.
Framing through contrast, okay.
Like the meaning of something is always relative.
Okay.
It depends on what you're comparing it to.
So it's about asking those questions compared to what? Compared to whom?
Exactly. Like, you could frame someone as direct
Right.
instead of abrupt,
Right.
depending on the environment they're in.
Okay.
Right. So it's all about context.
All about the frame.
Now, here's where it gets really strategic.
Okay.
Sapp talks about framing the problem in a way that leads to your solution.
Oh, interesting.
He says whoever defines the problem controls the solution.
So if you can frame the issue in a way that makes your solution seem like the obvious answer, you're more likely to succeed.
Exactly. He gives this example of, in a workplace setting.
Okay.
Instead of focusing on excessive workload,
Right.
you could frame it as a lack of clarity
Okay.
about roles and responsibilities,
Right.
which naturally leads to solutions about better organization and communication.
Oh, I see.
Right. Or instead of talking about control, you could talk about security,
Mm.
which might lead to different kinds of interventions.
Yeah.
So it's really about setting up the problem in a way that makes your idea seem like the natural solution.
It's like you're paving the way for your idea to be accepted.
Exactly.
Okay.
And finally, Sapp touches on the idea of reframing resistance.
Reframing resistance.
Yeah, like instead of just trying to fight it head on,
Okay.
you can try to align it with something positive,
Okay.
like a value that the person already holds,
Oh, I see.
and then kind of redirect that energy.
Yeah. So you're not denying their resistance.
Right.
You're just channeling it in a different direction.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So to kind of bring all this together,
Okay.
we've explored how the mind really seeks meaning,
Not just data.
not just data.
Right.
Right. We've looked at how our existing mental frameworks, these schemas,
Yeah.
they influence how we understand new information.
And the power of narrative.
Yes.
How a well-told story can make even a lie seem believable.
Exactly. And then we went into the psychology of suggestibility,
Right.
all those factors that can make us more open to influence.
And the subtle ways that priming can shape our thinking.
Yes. And finally, the crucial role of framing.
How we can set the stage for new ideas to be accepted.
Right. And for you, our listener,
Yeah.
who values efficiency, who wants to understand things quickly and thoroughly,
Right.
these core principles, they're like a shortcut
Okay.
to understanding how your own thoughts are formed.
How we're all influenced.
Yep.
And how we can influence others.
Exactly.
So now that we've explored these basic building blocks,
Yeah.
think about how these principles might already be at work in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the information you encounter every day,
Yeah.
the conversations you have, the sources you rely on.
Right.
Can you start to see some of these concepts in action?
Hmm.
What aspects seem particularly relevant or maybe even surprising
Yeah.
in light of what we've discussed?
That's such a great question to think about.
It is. It's a lot to unpack.
It is. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive
Yeah, this was great.
into the foundations of rhetorical inception.
Absolutely fascinating.
It's been really eye-opening for me, too.
It has.
And we hope you found it valuable as well.
And thought-provoking.
Yes. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, everyone.
Please visit my Amazon author page and learn more on the topics of law, hypnotism, and self-improvement.